Do you believe that God hears you, even when you pray lying down tired and without strength? What if I told you that this question has an answer that has been hidden from humanity? In today's video, you will hear the shocking story of Michael Sullivan, who died for 9 minutes and then came back with an urgent warning from Jesus about praying lying down. What he saw will shock you, so leave your like, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and comment here which city you are watching from, so I know how far this message is reaching. My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm 49 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. I'm an electrician, and until a few months ago, I thought I knew how to pray. I've always been that simple guy, hardworking, honest. I never went to church much, but I believed in God for as long as I can remember, but I always had a doubt. Know those nights when you lie in bed, tired, without the strength to say a word, and all you do is think, almost whispering, "God help me." Well, yeah, I always thought that it wasn't worth it, that God wanted me to be kneeling with beautiful words, hands raised, as if he only listened to those who were in the right posture. And believe me, I carried guilt for it. I thought I was failing God, that I was weak in faith, that he wouldn't hear me when I prayed, lying down. But everything changed that night. A night that started out ordinary and ended with the greatest spiritual revelation of my life. It was around 2 a.m. I was fixing an electrical panel in an industrial warehouse. Something went wrong. A short circuit. An electric shock went through my body. I felt a shock, and the next second, everything went black. The body fell. The heart stopped. I died. No knees bent, no hands raised, no voice, without any prayers ready. But it was exactly there that I discovered a truth that humanity has forgotten, or they have hidden it from us. Because in the next second, I was no longer in my body. I was floating in a space that was not made of walls, floor, or ceiling, but of peace, a living peace that seemed to have consciousness. That embraced me. And then, he appeared. There was no way not to recognize it. Before, even seeing your face, and my spirit knew it was Jesus. He didn't come with thunder or shouts. He came with a look that disarmed any resistance. That look knew everything. Every mistake, every tear. Every night when I could only say in my thoughts, almost whispering, "Lord, help me," while I was lying down. He came closer. He touched my shoulder. He smiled, and he said a sentence that tore my soul into 1,000 pieces. "Michael, I heard all your prayers, including the ones you said, lying down." At that moment, everything inside me fell apart, and what he revealed to me afterwards simply destroyed everything I thought I knew about prayer. When Jesus said that, "I heard your prayers lying down," while my spirit froze. My first impulse was to justify, explain, apologize, as if trying to defend yourself from something. But, Lord, I was tired. I didn't know if this was right. But before I said anything, he raised his hand, and everything changed. The space around us opened up as if tearing an invisible veil. And then, I saw scenes from my own life. Several, from different nights. There I was, lying in my bed, sometimes with my hand on my chest, looking at the ceiling, unable to say anything other than a shy thought. "God, I don't even know how to pray, but please hear me." And Jesus looked at that scene and smiled. A smile of someone who saw not the posture of the body, but the surrender of the soul. He looked at me and said something that made me tremble inside. That was one of his loudest prayers. "Hi?" I screamed inside, but I didn't even speak properly. I didn't even bend my knees. I couldn't even finish that prayer. And then he revealed, "The sky does not measure volume. The sky measures truth." At that moment, As if he tore apart time itself, other scenes began to open up. I saw an elderly lady, bedridden, praying silently, with tears streaming down her pillow. I saw a young girl, alone in the room, lying down with tears in her eyes, saying only in her thoughts, "God, I don't know if you still hear me." I saw a man in the hospital, on life support without a voice but with his spirit screaming for mercy. And Jesus looked at me and said, "Heaven bends to hear these. The bed becomes an altar. The BUI pillow becomes a pulpit, and silence becomes praise." I started crying, but it wasn't sadness. It was a cry of liberation, to realize that I've never been talking to the ceiling. I've never been alone, never. And then he showed me something even more shocking, a scene from myself. Years ago, kneeling in church, perfect posture, beautiful voice, rehearsed words. But my heart empty, my mind far away, my faith distracted. Jesus looked at that scene on, and his expression became serious. "Here, I saw your posture, but I didn't see you." That destroyed me, because I understood that it's not about looking spiritual, it's about being real. And then Jesus looked into my eyes, and what he said next, speechless. The look of Jesus. My God, that look. He didn't condemn me, he didn't judge me, he read me, he passed through me, he saw me completely. And then with a firmness that was not a demand but absolute truth, he said something that it was engraved in my soul like fire. "Michael, the problem is that many of my children that have learned to pray to be seen by others, or to feel better about themselves. But they have forgotten that I am not looking for performances. I am looking for hearts." The environment around us began to transform. It was as if a new dimension opened before my eyes, and then I saw. It was as if I was in a vast spiritual room, a kind of heavenly assembly. Hundreds, thousands of people on their knees, hands raised, voices raised, fervent prayers. But something was wrong. The prayers did not go up. They hit the invisible ceiling of that place and simply did not pass. Jesus looked at me, and with a tone of pain mixed with compassion, he said, "Not all reverence is surrender, not all prayer is surrender." And then he pointed to a well-dressed woman, praying on her knees at the altar. Her voice was strong, her words eloquent, tears streaming down her face, but around it floated little mirrors. Mirrors that reflected herself. Jesus whispered, "She doesn't pray to me. She prays to maintain her own image. She prays to appear spiritual, but her heart is far away." Soon after, I saw an impeccably dressed man kneeling, eyes closed, hands clasped in prayer. But within him, thoughts of vanity, of judging others, of comparing himself, of thinking himself spiritually superior. And Jesus, looking with sadness, said, "He prays beautiful, but he does not pray true." Those scenes destroyed me, because I realized how many times I have done this myself, how many times I have pretended to be well, pretended to have faith, pretended to have a beautiful prayer, when in fact, inside I was empty. Then in an instant, as a brutal contrast, Jesus showed me another scene, a woman lying down in the dark of the room, crying silently. Her body was shaking. She had no words. She just said mentally, "God, I can't take it anymore." And Jesus leaned. He leaned over to her. He touched her shoulder, and her face was filled with absolute love. "That is a prayer that shakes the heavens," he said. Then he pointed at me. "And yours, the one you did lying down, without strength, thinking that I wouldn't hear you. I heard you. Every thought, every tear, every sigh." And in that moment, I realized the biggest mistake is to think that God expects perfection. Heaven doesn't want actors. It wants children. And then, Jesus looked at me with an intensity that made my entire being tremble. Michael, and you haven't seen everything yet. Come, I want to show you where true prayers are born. When Jesus held my hand, something inexplicable happened. Space around us began to unfold as if the very fabric of the universe was being opened before me. Colors that do not exist on Earth. Sounds that were not sounds, but vibrations that I felt in my soul. It was like walking within the very consciousness of God. And then, the scenes began. I saw an old man lying in a hospital bed, intubated with eyes half open, completely still. But inside him, a thought pulsed. Lord, don't forget me. And Jesus shook my hand and said, the world sees a weak body, but I see a spirit screaming, and I bow down. Soon after, a young woman, lying on the bathroom floor, alone, sweating cold from crying so much, trembling. The voice did not come out, but his soul cried out, God, if you exist, hear me. And Jesus knelt beside her. Yes, the one who sustains galaxies, the one who carries the entire universe in his hands, and knelt next to someone who didn't even know if she deserved to be heard. And he looked at me and said, Michael, when a soul lies down, it is not weakness. It is surrender. The beds, the pillows, the sofas, the benches, all become altars when the heart turns to me. My entire being was shaking, because at that moment I realized that the biggest lie I was taught was that God only listens to those who pray on their knees. Jesus then opened another scene. I saw myself lying down, with eyes half open, unable to even speak. I just thought, God, I don't even know what to say. He pointed to that scene and declared, that was one of your most powerful prayers because you weren't trying to impress me. You were just being you. And then he completed, with a voice that seemed to carry the sound of the stars, the winds, the waters, and everything that lives. Heaven does not measure words. Heaven does not measure postures. Heaven measures truth. That sentence entered my spirit like a thunder of liberation. I get it. I finally get it. The bed is not a place of spiritual failure. The bed is an altar. When the heart bends, even if the body cannot. And Jesus, looking at me, concluded, the problem is not praying lying down. The problem is living standing up, far from me. My heart felt like it was going to explode. My entire soul was vibrating. I would never be the same again. Never again. And before I could process it all, Jesus looked at me again and said with a seriousness that made my being tremble, there is still something you need to see, something that many ignore, and that has kept millions away from me. When Jesus said there was something more for me to see, I felt a chill run through my soul. I knew it. Something very serious was about to be revealed. Suddenly, the environment around us began to change. That soft, welcoming light transformed into a space, loaded, heavy. It was like I was watching the world, but not the physical world, the spiritual world, hidden behind appearances. And then, I saw thousands, millions of people praying, crowded halls, full churches, people on their knees, raised hands, loud voices, loud chants, but something shocking. Many of these prayers just did not go up. They hit and fell. It was as if the spiritual ceiling was sealed. Nothing got through. And Jesus, with visible pain in his eyes, said to me, they pray, but they don't find me. They pray, but they are more concerned about what others think than about me. And then, he pointed, I saw a man, well-dressed, kneeling at the altar, eloquent voice, perfect words, but around him, Mirrors. Mirrors that only reflected himself. Jesus continued, "He doesn't pray to me, he prays to himself. He prays to his reputation, to maintain his image of being spiritual. But his heart is far away." Another scene. A woman surrounded by people praying loudly, crying, trembling. But inside her, vanity, competition, desire to be seen as more spiritual than others. And then Jesus, with a voice that seemed to weigh tons, spoke. "Pride can hide, even within prayer." Those words pierced me like a spear. How many times when have I done this? Praying beautifully, speaking loudly, perfect posture, but inside, empty, just wanting to feel accepted or more spiritual. And Jesus completed, "They kneel, but their hearts remain standing, far from me." It was like a punch to the soul. But then, as a contrast, he showed me another scene. A father, lying on the sofa, praying quietly so as not to wake his children. A young woman, curled up in bed, crying silently, saying only one sentence, "God, I don't know if you hear me, but if you can, hear me." And Jesus leaned over to them, touched their shoulders, wept with them, and he said, with a voice full of absolute love, "These do not know how to pray beautifully, but they are true, and I am pleased with them." Then he looked at me, serious, intense. "Michael, the bed has never been a problem for me. The problem has always been when the heart is far away. Many pray on their knees, but their souls are standing, full of pride, vanity, fear, hypocrisy." And then he squeezed my shoulder, looked into my eyes and said, "Heaven does not want actors. Heaven wants children, and children, I listen, even when they can only whisper, lying down, in the silence of dawn." My whole spirit crumbled, but Jesus wasn't finished. He took a deep breath, looked at me tenderly. "Michael, now you will see why your last prayer, even without words, changed everything." When Jesus said that, I felt like my whole being stopped. Your last prayer changed everything. But how? I could barely pray. I didn't speak. I just thought. I just wished. It just hurt. And then he showed me. The scene opened like a living window. There I was, lying on the floor of the warehouse, body motionless, chest heaving, staring into space. No words came out, no strength to move even a muscle. But inside me, there was a scream. Not a scream with sound, not a scream that comes out of the mouth. It was a cry from the soul, a silent, desperate cry that said, "God, listen to me." And then, we. From the sky, a light tore. It was like a beam of light cut through dimensions, passing through everything until it reached me. And next to that light, a melody. It wasn't a song I knew. It was as if the universe itself sang. Jesus pointed to me, there, fallen, and said that it was a prayer more powerful than any sermon ever preached, more powerful than any prayer ever said out loud with pretty words. I was shaking. I was crying. My spirit seemed to be shattered. That freed me, healed me, rebuilt me. And then, he continued, heaven does not demand performance. Heaven recognizes surrender. Your surrender, in that instant, was total. Because there was no more strength, only truth. And that is what the Father is pleased with. Jesus then came closer. He placed his hand on my chest exactly where on earth my heart stopped, and he said, "I hear even what your heart cannot say, even what your mouth cannot speak, even what your mind cannot organize into words." Ori. That moment I understood. Prayer begins in the spirit, not in the mouth, not in the position of the body, not in the sound, but in the truth. The bed is not weakness. The pillow is not an obstacle. Silence is not distance. The sky bends when a tired, broken, and sincere heart whispers, thinks, wishes, or even just feel, "God, help me." And Jesus, looking into my eyes, squeezed my shoulder tightly and said, "Michael, that prayer moved me. The whole sky moved." I cried. I cried like never before. I cried for years of useless guilt, for years of thinking my feeble prayers didn't reach the ceiling, and I discovered that they not only passed, but tore through the sky. But then, Jesus took a deep breath and said, in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of eternity, "There is still something you need to see before you go back." When Jesus said there was more, I felt like I was about to face one of the deepest truths of my entire existence. The environment began to transform again. It was as if we were rising, passing through layers and layers of light, until everything was transparent, alive, pulsating. And then, he showed me. Scenes opened up, like windows into eternity. Scenes of people in different places at different times, all united by a single detail. They were all lying down. An elderly lady had ridden, eyes closed, whispering softly, "Lord, if you still hear me, just give me peace." A father lying on the sofa with his hand over his face, crying silently without waking his children. "God, I don't know what to do anymore." A young woman curled up in bed, holding her pillow as if it were her only shelter in the world, unable to say anything other than a desperate thought, "It helps me." And Jesus. He leaned over to each of them. He touched their shoulders. He cried with them, and he smiled. And then, he turned to me and said a sentence that made my entire spirit vibrate as if the entire universe was paying attention at that moment. "Michael, the night is not absence. The night is an invitation." He continued, his eyes brimming with tears. "When you lie down, thinking you are failing in faith, when you think you don't have the strength to even bend your knees, when all you can manage is a whispered thought in the midst of silence, it is at that very moment that I come closest. The bed becomes an altar. The pillow becomes a pulpit. And the silence of dawn becomes the loudest song in the sky." Jesus then opened another vision. David, alone, lying on the ground in the middle of the desert, looking up at the starry sky, vulnerable, broken, running away, chased, tired. And Jesus whispered to me with a voice that seemed to cross time and space. Psalm 63 verse 6. "When I lie down, I remember you. I think of you in the night watches." And then it was completed. The night is the place where many find me without a mask, where the heart speaks louder than 1,000 words, where there is no audience, there is no vanity, only truth. I cried. My whole spirit crumbled. All the guilt, all the pressure, all that useless weight was torn from me like an old, dirty cloak. And Jesus squeezed my shoulder, looked into my eyes and said, "Michael, many of my children don't know, but the dawn is sacred ground." And at that moment I realized that everything I thought was weakness was always, in fact, an encounter, a place of intimacy, of truth, of absolute connection. But then, Jesus took a deep breath. His gaze became firmer, more intense, and he said, "Now, you will understand why it is not your time yet." When Jesus said it wasn't my time, a mixture of relief and pain ran through my being. Relief, knowing there was a way back. Pain, because leaving that place, leaving that presence, was the hardest thing I had ever felt. Then he turned, stretched out his hand, and before us appeared another vision. This time, they were not spiritual scenes. Era on earth. I saw my own body, lying on the cold floor of the warehouse with 2 paramedics running towards me, desperate, pressing on my chest, applying shocks, shouting my name. I saw the red lights of the ambulance reflecting off the walls. I saw my face, pale, lifeless, no pulse. And then, Jesus squeezed my shoulder, looked into my eyes with an intensity impossible to describe, and said, "Michael, I brought you here, not to trap you, but to prepare you." My eyes filled with tears. I knew that wasn't just an experience. That was a calling, a mission. Then he came even closer. He placed his hand on my chest, right where my heart had stopped, and said, with a voice that seemed to carry the sound of all creation, "Come back and tell my children that I listen, even when they are lying down, even when they think they have failed, even when they can only think or whisper or just cry silently. Say that the bed is an altar, that the pillow is a pulpit, that the dawn is sacred ground." My hands were shaking. My soul seemed to want to cling to that place, begging, "Please, don't send me back. Don't leave me. Don't take me away from your presence." But Jesus just smiled. That smile, my God, it was absolute love. It was infinite understanding. It was tenderness that crushed any resistance. And then, he said a sentence that burned inside me, like fire, like light, like eternal truth. "Michael, you have not disappointed me. Never. Not once. Do you know why? Because I hear even what your heart cannot say." At that moment I understood. I had never failed to pray. Never. Those nights lying down, in silence, without strength, were in fact my most profound encounters with God. And then with one last look, he reached out his hand and said firmly, with love, with power, "Now go and help others to find me too." The next second, everything was gone. The light, the peace, the presence. I was ripped from that place, pulled at a speed that seemed to cross dimensions, and then the pain. The pain returned, the weight of the body, the cold of the floor, the sound of the machines, the voice of the paramedics. "He's coming back. My God, he's coming back." My eyes snapped open. Seer, world is back. The earth is back. But I was never the same again. Never again. My eyes opened, and the first thing I saw was the white roof of the ambulance, flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the panels. The sound of heart machines. Beep, beep, beep. Life. The weight of my body returned. The pain, the cold, the dry mouth, the burning muscles, it was all there. One thing less. Doubt. That one would never come back. I looked at the paramedics who were holding my hand like someone who had already left. And suddenly he came back. They were in shock. One of them was holding my hand tightly, eyes wide, sweating, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Oh my God, he's back. He had no pulse. You were dead," he shouted. But I couldn't speak. My throat was dry. My voice wouldn't come out. But inside me only one sentence echoed. a single powerful, crushing truth. He heard me. He heard me. Even when I was lying down, even when I thought I wasn't praying right, he heard me. The sounds of earth seemed distant. People's voices, the alarms, everything seemed secondary. Because inside me the sky still echoed. His voice still vibrated in my spirit. His hand still seemed to press against my chest. His gaze, my God, that gaze, will never leave me. For years I carried the guilt. For years I thought that God would only hear me if I was on my knees with beautiful words, with sacred postures. For years I compared myself. I thought I was too small, too weak. And now, I knew. The bed was never the problem. Weakness was never the problem. Silence was never the problem. The only problem was that I believed that God needed performance. And now, it had died. Died on that floor. Died along with the old version of me. Died, never to return. When the doctors took me to the hospital, they did all the tests. The report was clear. Cardiac arrest. Time without pulse. 9 minutes. Enough, according to medicine, to cause irreversible damage to the brain, the heart, everything. But the exams, zeroed. Nothing. No after effects, no injuries, no explanation. And I knew. I had been touched, I had been restored, and more than that, I had been sent. Sent for what? To tell, to scream, to not let anyone else carry the lie that I carried for years. What? Lie. That God only listens to you if you are perfect. That heaven needs rituals, forms, poses. Lie. Heaven listens to the heart. Always. Even when you think you don't have the strength to speak. Even when you can only pray lying down. And at that moment, one thing became clear in my mind. I'm back. But I'm back. With a mission. Lying in the hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling, I knew. I was no longer the same man who fell dead on that floor. Everything I believed about God, about prayer, about faith, was destroyed. And in its place, truth was born. And this truth, no one will take it from me anymore. No one will hide it anymore. My whole life, I felt like I was failing in faith. That God wanted more from me. That praying when I was tired wasn't enough. That praying lying down wasn't worth it. That He would only hear me if I was kneeling, with the right words, with the right posture, in the right place. Lie. The biggest lie they put in my heart. And now I know. Heaven doesn't want actors, heaven wants children, and children are heard, always. The bed was never a problem. The sofa was never a problem. Silence was never a problem. Do you know what has always been a problem? Distance, fear, pride. The lie that God only comes close when you are whole, strong, and spiritually beautiful. No. The sky bends down when you're broken, when you're weak, when all you can say or even think, God, help me. And in that place between life and death, Jesus looked into my eyes and said to me, Michael, you have never disappointed me, because I don't listen to you with my ears. I listen to you with my heart. And I listen even to what your heart cannot say. And that's why I'm here. It's not to convince you. It's not to scare you. It's to remind you of what the world tried to make you forget. That dawn is sacred ground. That the pillow is an altar. That tiredness is not a spiritual failure. That silence is not the absence of God. That He sees, that He hears, that He bends down to those who surrender, and not to those who perform. And if you, like me, have ever felt too weak to bend your knees, if you've ever felt too small, too dirty, too unworthy, thinking that his prayer didn't go past the ceiling. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. She didn't just go through the ceiling, she tore up the sky. And God heard you, always heard you, always. I went back. I'm back. So that no one else will forget that what moves the sky is not the posture of the body. It is the surrender of the soul. And if the only thing you can say today is, God, help me, know that this is the loudest prayer that heaven can hear. He's listening to you, right now, at this very moment, even if you're just lying down. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.